Hey there, welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabriele Nicolet. What am I? A toddler whisperer, a parent coach, and a speech therapist. And I'm having a day. I am delighted to be joined by Nicole Weston. Nicole, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me, Gabrielle. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I am very excited for our conversation. Before we get started, and you see, I forget who I am all the time, but please tell the good people a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, yeah, not a problem. Thank you so much. Well, my name's Nicole Weston. A little bit about myself. It's hard to know where to start with that question. I am a former public school teacher. I am also a former private school, head of school, assistant head of school, and admissions director. And I am now launched my own business, Restore Peace Coaching, where I am working with parents who are raising kids with anxiety and OCD because I want to help them disrupt the grip that has on their lives.
And you have a very specific reason why you work with parents of children with anxiety and OCD. And let's talk about that for a little bit. What happened to you?
Yeah, what happened to me? Well, fortunately, I'm on the other side of that now. But what happened to me was I'm trying to think of the year. It was roughly 2018. One of my children experienced mental health crisis, and it was really hard to detangle what was going on with her. It ends up being a whole host of anxiety disorders that are commingling together to create a lot of issues for her. But it was a very trying time. It was really like every parent's nightmare. She wanted to return home several times. There were it was a very difficult time. I don't know how else to say that. I know there's other parents experiencing it. It was lonely. It was isolating. It made me rethink everything I understand about her and other kids similar to her. And I am now in a place where what I did to make it through, I am aiming to share, or I'm not aiming to share, I am sharing with parents who are going through the same thing and who really resonate with how I do the process of kind of moving through some of these things. So I coach parents, and then I also run retreats.
Yeah. And I want to get to that in a second, but I'm curious. You kind of jumped right to the crisis point, which is where many people realize, no, and this is totally legit, right? It's like, oh, and it's kind of smacks you upside the head. And there are these, some people call them inflection points or pivot points or paradigm shifts, whatever you want to call them. But there are these moments of crisis. And in the rearview mirror, my guess is you can see some of the things that were leading up to that crisis. And to the extent that you care to share, were there, and this is all probably in hindsight, number one, because we're all just doing the best that we can with the tools we have at the time. And so, this is not an attempt to be like, well, you should have figured this out sooner, because that's not it. But can you see where this came from? I guess is my question.
That's an excellent question. Yes, there were signs along the way. She had, experienced anxiety. She kept a lot in. One of the things that she experienced was existential OCD. So it wasn't visible what she was going through, a lot of it. But there were certainly some signs. And I think, when I look back, it was, anxiety at times that seemed a little too much for what she was concerned about. However, she was always able to regroup and go on. So it didn't disrupt functioning at all. So she was functioning just fine. It was when adolescence hit, and I think other things happened, that she kind of then the functioning failed.
And I think this is true of lots of kids, because really what we're talking about when we're talking about complicated kids and adults for that matter, is nervous systems, right? We're talking about sensitive nervous systems that have a capacity, and there are moments in life when that capacity is where the demands of the environment are within that capacity, And then there are moments in the environment, adolescence being a prime one of them, where the capacity, the expectations and the changes and the shifts that are happening are outside of the capacity of the nervous system. And that's where we get into burnout and crisis. And I think what you experienced with your daughter, yes?
Yes. And I think, I would go into a slightly different place, particularly with my daughter, because of what she experienced, um, is that yes, that is there. And I think that what she was also doing in a sense was kind of, well, not kind of, she is looking at the world. She's part of what she's experienced has gifts with it. There are gifts with anxiety, as there also are hardships with it and challenges with it. So with the gifts, what ends up happening for her is that she really opened up and began to question how we are running things in this world on all levels. The OCD with the existential, the scrupulosity component is all about morals and whether or not people are operating morally. So she has been spending the last several years thinking about constantly all of our systems and whether or not they are moral and ethical. And so what's interesting is that actually kind of brought me into a whole nother way of looking at things. And I would actually say she kind of woke me up in some ways to things in the world that maybe need to change, and that she was, so I learned from her more through all of this than I would say the other way around.
And
So,
say that again, sorry.
yeah, no, I mean, she's learned a lot from me too, but I tell you, this was a gift. I wouldn't say that when I was in the height of it. And she certainly does suffer with the anxiety, but it has been a gift in many ways to understanding. Um, I think what I think is happening with a lot of neurodivergent kiddos.
For sure, for sure. And you and I, before we hit record, we're talking about some research. And you, because of your teaching psychology, used to teach AP Psych, right?
Yes.
You are aware of some of these studies as well about the impact on the brain at a base level. So like at a nervous system regulation level, like the hum underneath the thinking, that the environment has a real impact on that. So here's what I mean. There's this newer study in 2022 that I just heard about, in which they compared the nervous system effects, and I'm sure they were measuring like cortisol and whatever else they were doing, but like objective physical measures when humans were exposed to bird song versus when humans were exposed to traffic noise. And in both conditions, the people in the study, I don't think they reported a different level of conscious anxiety, but their bodies were registering an unconscious level of anxiety. They were stressed. And so where I'm kind of trying to go with this very long story is your daughter is very sensitive to probably her physical environment, number one, but also like the constructed human environment that we are living in, which many of us don't spend a lot of time thinking about. Like, I'm not up at night. Well, now I am, but prior to January 2025, I was not up at night wondering about the morals and the ethics. It's not actually really true, but I'm not up at night worrying about this. I think about it, but I'm not up at night worrying about it in the same way that your daughter is. She is hypersensitive to that kind of aspect of things. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, very much so. She runs hot. That's how her therapist likes to talk about her nervous system runs real hot.
Yeah. And that can be, if we're not aware of that, that can be really problematic.
Yeah.
Because we put ourselves in situations where we're going into overload. And so my guess is, you tell me that, and we're going to get to the parents in a second, because part of this certainly relates to the parents' nervous systems, is kids and parents and families get to modify their environments to better suit their nervous systems. Yes?
Did you say parents and
Parents
family?
and
Yeah.
families and children and people affected by anxiety, right?
Yes.
One of the tools that we give them is, hey, you got to change some things. You can't actually, I mean, you can, but like working a 14-hour day in an office building where people are blip, 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 playing off of you all the time, maybe that's not going to work so well for you,
Yes.
for example. Do you want to take that and run with it a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. And so, yes, that is absolutely true. And one of the things that parents that I think, so I found that, yes, and when my daughter was in crisis and we didn't quite understand what was going on, I was trying to ensure in every way that I possibly could that she was still going to do the things in the same way that we had been doing before. I looked at this as, because it was adolescence, I also had that mindset of like, oh, you're just rebelling. Like, I didn't quite understand all of the elements. It wasn't until I stopped and listened to her and got in a place where I could actually hear her and what she was saying she needed, because it was very different than what we were experiencing before and how we ran our lives before. But it took a lot of deprogramming to get to that place. My whole background is education, and I had worked with so many kids, and I was a public school teacher, and then I've worked in micro schools that are really catering to a lot of kids who have these neurodivergent nervous systems and brains, and I I hadn't seen a connection, and I at the time I was like, no, this is not who you are. I've never seen you like what I'm seeing with these other kids. This is not you. And so I was in denial, I was in resistance, and it wasn't until I was able to get myself in a place where I could hear her and listen to her and then take the lessons I've learned to be able to support her in the way she needed.
And how, Nicole, did you do that? Because some of that, you're a lot of that you're now doing with your clients.
Yeah. And very short, I locked myself in a basement and painted for 3 years in silence and went out in nature every second I could. I mean, that's all I did. It was major crisis. And I actually like was called to paint mountains. I'd never painted before. And it was like, paint a mountain, paint a mountain. So I did that. I got quiet.
Hmm.
I got real quiet. And then I allowed what I was experiencing to come through without my mind getting in the way, right? Because that's so much of the programming I think that we get. And so I was able to let go of it and have it show up in ways that I was not anticipating through painting, and different types of painting bring out different things. Sometimes, for example, you need to make decisions. So when I need to make real tough decisions, I would get really detailed in my painting and make decisions in my painting. Other times I needed to be fluid like water. I needed to move and be able to like flow and not resist. So I would do different types. I really learned to listen to my body and what I needed. And with that came a whole lot of realization, unlearning, a lot of letting go, and a lot of bringing in new understanding so that I could be in a place where I could hear her and support her effectively.
This is so interesting. Basically, yeah, I mean, I'm going to just summarize it. You had to quiet your mind and listen to your body and your heart. And there's some interesting research bubbling around about this. The conflict, I'm going to ask you this question. Would you say that the resistance you were experiencing prior to this which is like, this isn't you, this isn't right, I need you to keep doing this, that's coming from it's not even coming from your programming, it's coming from the conflict between what you know in your bones and your body is correct and what your mind is telling you must be so. Because those two things are different.
Yeah, and I would also say ego in there. My own ego was involved.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was definitely a disconnect. Yes, and I was also, and I don't know whether it was what you're describing. I became dysregulated in ways. I was having emotions come out of me in ways that I had never seen before as I was going about my day. Maybe it's partly from that, and maybe I was so intertwined and entangled with her emotions. This was also during COVID. So I was working in the house and her room was right across from my office. And so I was like just taking in all of her energy, which was, anxiety is all about fear. And 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 then depression often goes with it as well. And so that also seeped in. And so I became, without realizing it, so entangled. And so it was a combination, I think, of one having to think like, what do I think and what do I know? And I didn't know that I didn't know things. I thought I knew, you know, I thought I knew a lot. I thought I was a very different person. Not a very different person. I still have a lot of similarities, but I didn't realize some of the judgments and other things I needed that were getting in the way,
Yeah.
right? Through my lens of in my opinion, I think a lot of pressure is on women and moms in particular, that if something goes wrong with the child, it's your fault. Somehow it reflects back on how you parented. So
Mhm.
I had to work through that. That's what I mean by that, deprogramming. And I had to let go of things. And I've always been one to like fully accept responsibility. So that was a hard one for me because I was struggling and I'm like, oh, I think I've done a lot wrong here. What have I done wrong? And then all of a sudden, every little thing that I ever had that I ever thought I did wrong came up. And then I had to like forgive myself for all of those little things and realize I didn't cause this. I did not cause this. Parents don't cause the anxiety. It's there. It's their nervous system.
I want
And
you to say that again. I'm going to say it too. Parents do not cause anxiety.
yes, thank you. Because that's what I heard in schools. Parents do not cause anxiety. They don't cause it.
Nope.
Nope. It's there. It's the nervous system. It's how they're wired. It's how they're designed. And there's beautiful things that come with that. And there's also some challenges that come with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you were saying before we hit record, you can't, you have to put on your own oxygen mask, and I want you to explain what you mean when you say that. I think
Mhm.
you also said you can't pour from an empty cup.
Mhm.
Or maybe that was me listening and hearing that. What do you mean by that? And when you are working with your people,
Yeah. Yeah.
how does that work?
Yeah. Yep. So, with the parents that, they for the parents who are raising their kiddos and they find that through this process, the child's in crisis and it knocks them off balance, right? And knocks them off balance. Maybe they feel lost. Maybe they feel like they're walking on eggshells. Maybe they don't know who they are anymore. They're kind of in this like world. It is really hard to be effective with your child when that's what you're experiencing. And it is normal to experience that when your child suddenly is in crisis. And it throws you into kind of this place as well. And so, the first thing, if that's the case, it's going to be really hard to really be able to talk through. I think sometimes, at least for some people. Now, I'm going to just add in here. I'm pretty sure I'm an undiagnosed dyslexic and ADHDer, right? I have always been hands-on. When I taught AP psychology, I taught it different. It was experiential. Students were engaged in projects and moving around all the time because I think that I just think that's so important. And so for some people, sitting and talking about what's going on through like coaching or therapy or things like that, it works great. For other people, they need to process with their body. They need to move. They need to do things. That's where I found that I was. And so that's why I spent several years painting and walking in the woods and hiking up mountains, because I needed that to be able to get clarity so that I could then show up strong and be the parent that she needed me to be and learn the other things that go with it, right? I needed to then learn, okay, exactly how do you parent a child with anxiety? Exactly, like what are the things to do? How do you avoid accommodation or being too demanding of a parent? And how do you like find that place where you're actually being a supportive, compassionate parent with an understanding of where your child is and where they and accepting that and not resisting it and allowing them to be who they are and where they are. And it's okay if they don't fit into the same mold as the rest of the world, but you got to get yourself in a place to go there to be effective in that way first.
Yeah, and the neuroscience literature, and I talk about this as regards kids, will tell you that nobody is learning anything in a state of stress. And
Yes.
be that acute stress from like a meltdown in public, right? That's got you like really knocked off balance, or be that the chronic effect of chronic stress over time because this is happening and happening and happening. But one is not learning. One's brain is not capable of learning new information in a state of stress. The only thing your brain is concerned about when you're stressed is survival. And what
Yes.
do I have to do to get from this very dangerous place to any other place?
Mhm.
And so, again, I talk about this a lot with kids because we've got teachers and well meaning professionals and parents who are trying to teach their kids about keeping their hands to themselves, for example, and not hitting in the moment when the hitting is occurring. That is the wrong time. Nobody's learning when kids are hitting. And in the same way, you're not going to teach during a panic attack. You can't.
Yes.
But I think it requires a tremendous amount of self-awareness
Mhm.
to understand that one is in a state of stress and therefore not able to learn. Because I think sometimes what happens is, and I think ADHDers, my husband's an undiagnosed ADHDer as well, we like just keep like pounding at it and pounding at it and pounding at it, and we don't get anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. We kick ourselves because we knew that's what we were supposed to do, but we couldn't do it. Right. Because in the moment we hadn't, it's, yeah. And then there's the shame that comes too. And so for parents in particular, for moms in particular, the shame is real because the outside world is saying, or whether or not they're currently saying it, it has been said and it has been often internalized. And so there is this like everyone is going to think that I'm coddling my child or that I'm a horrible parent because I allowed this to happen. And so there's a lot of shame. And for people, for this was what was true for me, it was really hard to go talk to a therapist then
Yep.
because I didn't, how are they really going to think about, they've been trained to go, oh, this is the parent, like let's see if we can change this parenting thing with this person. Like there was a lot of fear and shame around it. And so I think that's why I retreated to painting because it was just me processing the material through that silence where I think I really was connecting with something much, much bigger than just myself in doing that. And it was coming in and supporting me and helping me through that process. And, it was an incredible experience to do that. And also I did do some therapy. I didn't ignore that. I think I did it after I got some painting out of the way. And part of it too is making space. So when you are, if you have ideas or thoughts about your child, which was where what I didn't have the thoughts about schools or neurodivergent kids. I've always thought that they were amazing and cool, right? And but I had expectations of myself as a parent and expectations of my daughter that I needed to let go of. And you can't bring new stuff in until you let go of what is already there. You have to make room and space for it. It has to come in. And so
Yeah.
you got to get it out and you got to figure out what you need to get out, what you need to save and what you need to let go of.
Ugh. And that, listen, for anybody who's listening and is like, oh my God, that sounds like so much work. It is. And it's hard. And it's not fun. Um, and it's totally worth doing.
Yes, yes. And if you can find a way like doing something creative to get there, it actually can be fun. Because it sneaks in there. It kind of sneaks in sometimes and gives you insights. And so you can be doing this painting thing and and then all of a sudden you have insights and you can process in a way that doesn't feel as targeted against yourself. It's not as cruel. The voice doesn't go off in your head shaming you. Instead, you're like discovering it outside of you. It's like you're moving it out of yourself onto the canvas. So now you can see it without the judgment and the harshness.
Ooh, ooh, I love it. Um,
That chill's saying that too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Both, yeah, we're both resonating on that one. There's a book I read recently by Jill Bolte Taylor, who is, she also has one of the most watched TED Talks of all time called My Stroke of Insight. She has
Yes.
something called a brain huddle which is coming to mind as you're talking, because there are different parts of our brain that are designed to do different things. So we have a language center, and most of us are very left brain oriented. And yeah, and some of us are not. And when you're not, it's actually really hard to live in a modern Western society, number one. But it strikes me that what you're doing with your clients is getting them connected. And when you said there was something larger than you that was supporting you, that feeling, that experience, that reality comes from the right side of your brain. Your right brain is the one that is out of time, universally connected, in this like state of flow. And again, go watch that TED Talk because it's phenomenal. And maybe we'll link to it in the thing in the show notes. But that kind of siphoning off of energy from the got to get things done. Here's my to-do list. We got to fix this. This is a problem. You need to do better. From that list, that just creates a lot more space. And so it's a really interesting idea she has about this brain huddle where you actually invite all of the parts of yourself to come and like come in together, and like you do a little kumbaya and like you feel better. You know?
That sounds wonderful.
What's that?
That sounds wonderful. Is she the one who did the Stroke of Genius TED Talk?
My Stroke of Insight.
Stroke of Insight. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, there was one Stroke of Genius, I think.
She had a stroke. It's probably the same one.
It's probably the same one, yes. And she's a neurosurgeon.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Same,
yeah,
same. It's really good. Nicole, if people want to learn more about you and your practice, what do they do?
Yeah, well, I have a website. It's Restore Peace Coaching. I think I did not mention the name of my business, just my name. So Restore Peace Coaching, and it's really named after what I was seeking through that whole time. So restorepeacecoaching.com. I have the retreats, and I also offer one-to-one coaching for parents to really get in with how it's showing up for them with their specific child. But what I am most excited about right now is the retreats and the bringing art and nature into the processing in a way that is just more fun and also just helpful.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about your property, which is tell the good people about where you do your retreats.
Oh, yes, yes. So I live in Culpeper, Virginia, right outside of the Shenandoah National Park. And so one of my favorite hikes to do, and I've done it, I did it a lot. I do it every time things in the world get crazy. I head out to Old Rag and do a hike. It is a tough one. And it is, the hikes are designed to be tough because it's to find your strength. You got to remember that you are strong, because when you're in the midst of all of that, you feel pretty weak and not strong, pretty much the opposite of strong. And so it also it's pretty high. It's the highest point in the area. And so you get a beautiful new perspective, which is helpful. So yeah, right outside of that. And then we have property here with a beautiful pond where we do the painting retreat. So it's really like immersed in nature. Everything is about nature, using the natural elements to inform what we're doing on the hikes and also in the painting.
And then taking that experience of peace, of nature, of resilience, of strength back with you into your regular life, if you will. Yeah?
Yes. There's insights that come. Yes. Taking that back to be able to now be grounded in a way and have some tools. There's some tools that are shared during it too to help, but it's primarily about kind of recentering and getting yourself grounded and getting yourself with some tools so that you can then show up a little bit differently, more compassionately with your child, if that is something that is helpful for that particular parent.
Everything is at restorepeacecoaching.com. We will link to it in the show notes. And Nicole, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. This is a lot of fun. Thanks, Gabrielle.